right now, according to the Gallup organization, only 1 in 2 of your employees know what is expected of them at work. Just 50%. And if you work in a scientific or technical or computer related industry, that number actually drops to 30%. And the truth is that clear roles and expectations are the foundation of employee engagement. So if we want to move the needle in our employee engagement and experience, this is where we absolutely have to start. Hi there. Welcome to People Ops Problems. I'm Leanne Legasse, and I'm an HR and People Ops consultant specializing in helping leaders improve engagement and retention and internal communication, and also equipping people managers to do the same. Today, I am pumped to get to share with you what is, albeit not the most exciting or sexiest thing that we can do as leaders to drive engagement and retention, but in my experience, the most foundational and the most important, and that's role clarity and clear expectations. But we're gonna look at it from a bit of a different angle. So we're gonna start by defining the problem. What is the villain in our organizations when it comes to establishing those clear expectations and having role clarity for our employees? And the villain is absolutely role ambiguity. So I want you to internalize that. I want you to remember that the villain is role ambiguity, and that villain is everywhere. It's wanting to be everywhere in your organization, decreasing the productivity and efficiency of your employees, stressing everybody out. And so as leaders, what we need to do is to fight that role ambiguity, stay watchful and fight it. And so I want to share just a couple of things that I see happen in organizations when there is a lot of role ambiguity. And again, the research is going to bear this out too. And then I want to share with you 3 quick strategies and a really cool tool that you can use to help your organization build role clarity and reduce role ambiguity. So first, let's talk about what's the problem with having a little bit of ambiguity. And this is important because some of us are more prone to ambiguity, and we like where there's a little bit of uncertainty and that we're getting to evolve. And sometimes in agile organizations, we sort of have to come to a place of acceptance of ambiguity existing, and that's okay, but it doesn't change the fact that the research shows the most foundational thing that we can do for our employees to keep them engaged and then ultimately retained is to give them role clarity and to reduce role ambiguity, right? So what's the problem with role ambiguity? Well, and I think the biggest problem is that when employees don't have clear role expectations, when they don't understand how their role fits into the larger vision, mission, purpose of the organization, when they don't understand how their role relates to, the roles of their team members, task ownership and role ownership is very unlikely. I mean, how can I take ownership of my role if I don't really understand it, if I don't understand what I'm expected to do and what my teammates are expected to do? Another thing that happens when there's a lot of role ambiguity is that employees don't feel like they have an internal locus of control. And so I want to share with you just the definition of internal locus of control. This is the degree to which people believe that they, as opposed to external forces, beyond their influence, have control over the outcome of events in their lives. So people with an internal locus of control take more responsibility for their actions, they're more confident in the face of challenges, and they tend to achieve greater success at work, right? So it's really important that we deliver clear expectations, that we lower role ambiguity so that our employees have a strong internal locus of control. The other thing that happens when we have a lot of role ambiguity on our team is that conflict and turf wars are much more likely. So one red flag in your organization is, do you hear employees saying things like, so-and-so is really stepping out of his lane, or why was she included in that meeting and I wasn't, or I thought I was taking the lead on this? When you hear phrases like that as a leader, that is clue number one that there is some rampant role ambiguity happening in your organization, and you want to start to weed that out. Another thing that happens when there's role ambiguity is, of course, time, energy, resources are wasted. We want to be mindful of providing clear structure and systems and processes for our employees so that we pave the way for all of these things that matter to us in terms of them reaching their outcomes, right? The last thing I'll say, although I could probably keep going, the last thing I'll say about this is when you have a lot of role ambiguity on the team, your chances of those employees getting burned out skyrockets, right? Because there's a relationship between employee engagement and well-being, right? And our sense of how much we understand our roles and how clear everything is, and do we know what success looks like, right? So the villain here is absolutely role ambiguity. What we want to do as leaders is we want to really fight for role clarity. And so I want to share just 3 quick strategies with you that you can use in your organization to start to fight against role ambiguity. All right, strategy number 1 for fighting, tackling role ambiguity in our organizations is to mine for ambiguity with really great questions. This is something that you can do in your one-on-ones. This is something you can do as you have organic conversations with your team members. This is something you can do in a team meeting, or even at an organizational level on your employee engagement surveys or your pulse surveys or in your other forms of employee listening. But I want to share just a couple of examples of questions that you can use to mine for ambiguity, because remember, this is our villain and we're watching for him or her anywhere we can in the organization. So here are a couple of questions. 1, where is there ambiguity in your role? Now that sounds so simple, but to take the time to ask an employee, where is there ambiguity in your role? You'd be shocked at the answers you get. In fact, when I coach leaders, I often give them this assignment. Go ask, your 5 direct reports or your employees, where is there ambiguity in your role? And you would be shocked at the data that you'll get back that it was totally surprising that you had no idea. So I encourage you to keep asking that question. Where's there ambiguity in your role as it relates to, how you fit into the larger purpose or the larger team? Keep asking those questions. Another good question, how can I set more concrete expectations for you? And by doing so, you're really framing that question in a way that lets the truth float to the surface. Because if I say, hey, are you clear on your role? Well, that is a question that's going to shut down conversation. If I'm an employee answering that question, I feel a little bit like, oh, the burden's on me. I should feel clear about expectations. But if my leader says, hey, where can I add clarity, or where can I give you more concrete expectations? There's an assumption there that there's always ways to learn and grow and improve in communicating expectations. So I really encourage you to do that. Ask questions, mine for it in your one-on-ones, in your team meetings, and even at an organizational level, Okay, so the second strategy that we can use to fight for role clarity is in our teams, to create some rules of engagement, right? And what I mean by this is have conversations with your team members, whether that's a leadership team, whether that's your kind of working group, have team-based conversations where everybody agrees on the rules of engagement. For example, right? How is it on our team that we're going to communicate with one another? What's the cadence, right? How are we going to engage with each other on Slack or on Teams? How are we going to handle conflict? What are our kind of agreed upon standards and norms about what we're going to do when we're not reaching consensus together, right? So having just those conversations about rules of engagement can make a huge difference in helping your employees achieve clarity of role. The other thing I would say about this particular one, establishing rules of engagement, is it helps you identify where there are breakdowns in terms of reporting structures, your informal communication networks, or that organizational grapevine, right? Because there's the org chart, which is theoretically the way that communication should flow, right, in reporting structures. But when I work with organizations, oftentimes we'll map out what those informal structures are, because like clockwork, there's often a lot of ambiguity about who do I ask for about this? Who do I go to about this? Should so-and-so be looped into this conversation? And so the more that your team members don't have clarity about those rules of engagement, how we communicate with one another, the less likely they are to say that they know what's expected of them at work, right? So we really want to spend some time thinking about those rules of engagement. Another conversation we can have sort of under the umbrella of this second strategy is to have team meetings where we very clearly identify the roles and responsibilities of everybody on the team. This is crucial when we have a new team member or when our roles are evolving. So let's say you've onboarded a new employee and maybe that role didn't exist previously. This is when you're watching out for that role ambiguity villain because it's going to be everywhere. You've got your, already pre-existing, team members who are going to be all of a sudden struggling with a little bit of role ambiguity, lack of clarity because there's this new team member. So to take the time in margin to sit down and actually discuss roles and responsibilities is going to make a huge difference. And I'm going to share a resource for you in the notes here so that you can use a template almost to help you through some of those meetings. So look for that. And really the whole heart of the second strategy is that you're communicating about how we are going to communicate on our team, how we're going to exist on our team. So yes, very meta, but it's so important that we take the time to establish those rules of engagement for our team. Okay, and finally, the third strategy that we can use at an organizational level to combat role ambiguity and fight for role clarity is to complete job analyses and to pay close attention to how accurate and how concrete our job descriptions are. And this may sound, again, you're like, this is the boring people ops or the boring HR stuff. I hear that all the time. But listen, stay with me. This is the most crucial thing that the organization as a whole can do to establish role clarity is to ensure that we have a concrete grasp of the jobs that we need to fulfill our vision, mission, and purpose, that we understand how every one of these jobs contributes to our organizational objectives, to our big goals. And I find that when organizations are scaling and growing, this often gets put on the back burner because again, you're trying to keep up with demand and there's great things happening and you're seeing momentum in terms of how you're serving clients and customers, but you can't forget that the infrastructure in terms of roles and responsibilities has to stay intact if your team members are to be positioned to execute, in all of these ways where you're scaling and growing. So I have just a couple of thoughts on this one. One, I want you to think about, as an organization, conducting job analyses. So I'm going to share a resource with you that I think could be incredibly helpful for you as your organization. And you could even do this just for, if you're a people manager, you on your team, and it may not be formal in your organization, but you could still use it and leverage it in a way that gives you all sorts of helpful, data and information from your team members. But a job analysis is really just a process used to collect information about a specific job to determine which responsibilities, activities, and objectives it includes. So your job analysis helps clarify. And when there is clarity, it results in much more positive outcomes. So if you were to conduct a job analysis, you would get a really good sense of, what experience, training, qualifications are necessary for this job. And that's great. But in addition to giving you some of that information, it's going to help provide your entire organization with role clarity. So this is something that you can do. Again, it is a little more time intensive, but it's absolutely worth it to fight for role clarity in your organizations. So if you will do these three things, right? If you will stay curious and mine for role ambiguity where it exists by asking really great questions and digging in, if you will create some rules of engagement for your team members, and if you will at an organizational level really spend some time thinking through the specific jobs of your team members, you will see so much momentum happen with respect to those foundational aspects of employee engagement: clear roles clear expectations about what success looks like. And so I want you to check out these two resources that I've included for you. One is sort of just a guide to help you through a team meeting, if you have a new team member to help you fight for role clarity. And then the second one is this job analysis guide that will give you some kind of handles on how to conduct a job analysis that will lead to better role clarity in your organizations. So that's it. That's it for now. As always, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.